Welcome everybody to this session about conscious living. My name is Markus Vähälä and I'm the CEO of Citizen Network Cooperative, supporting citizen network groups around the world in more than 50 countries. 294 groups around the world are seeking pathways to the future and creating sustainable ways of living together. Care in community, in the neighborhoods, and growing as citizens are at the core of Citizen Network. Joining Citizen Network is free as an individual and as group, so join today and keep up with the news and new events around conscious living. Today we are very fortunate to celebrate Solstice and the International Yoga Day together with Varun Vidyarthi. He is the pioneer of the self-help process of social and economic empowerment. He has a formal background in engineering and management, and after working a short while with Tata Motors, he abandoned the corporate career and started working in rural India. Varun and his wife Amla started the institution Manavodaya that pioneered the self-help group movement in India. Varun has lectured in different institutions and universities across the world on practical methods of enabling people's participation. As a pioneer of the self-help process of social and economic empowerment, Manavodaya is credited with introduction of new values and methods in tackling poverty and social injustice among the poorest segments of rural populations. The self-help groups spread rapidly in India with direct support of the banks and the government. However, the values that created the spark among people for holistic change were lost in the progress. So today we are fortunate to have Varun with us, introducing the themes related with conscious living, and then we can discuss together how to proceed with this knowledge that we are creating and sharing today. So welcome, Varun. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. This is a very interesting way to celebrate the International Yoga Day for me, because for me, yoga is not just about doing physical exercises. It's a process of looking within and looking without at the community at large and seeing our role through which we can transform ourselves together with that of all the disadvantaged people, the chaos in the world, and become a figure that can move towards both, self-enlightenment and progress of the community. Since we have been practicing this for almost 40 years, this has been summarized into simple steps in conscious living, which are, interestingly, they collate very easily with the worldviews of thought leaders of different civilizations. And therefore, it is a process of sharing these values and methods that can help in transforming the lives of large sections of population everywhere in the world. I'm therefore very happy to link this subject to yoga, because yoga is a science through which one is able to deal with one's own self at the same time with the community, and we'll show how. We'll have a short presentation for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll leave again 30 to 40 minutes for intensive discussion, because I really hope that we can have discussion on many of these subtopics and can even then go ahead with the larger program, because this is just an introductory talk. The detailed version is now available as a course, a very simple course, which is quite popular in Indian universities and in different places, professionals across the world. Everything that I'm saying today comes totally from our field learning. The things that we picked up while working among the poorest segments of the population. And therefore, uh, we are very pleased to say that this has made a huge difference not only to our own lives, but to the lives of several people, both who are living in disadvantaged conditions, as well as those who are working among them, the professionals who are working among them, the people serving the government, the banks, the NGOs, the academicians, the students. They've all benefited from the whole process of sharing of this information, which we are now putting it into two blocks. One is on methods of building self-awareness, and the other is on methods of building collective awareness. So that is the fundamental thing from our side. How do we build self-awareness and how do we build collective awareness? Both these are, interestingly, it's a process and we have to start somewhere. Simple, small steps. Today, hopefully, we'll touch on some of them and we hope to go deeper in the next phases of the program. The fundamentals of building self-awareness and collective awareness started with my own life. When I started questioning the purpose of my own life. And that was, I think, is the first step towards building of self-awareness. What is the purpose of my life? I started questioning this when I was, working comfortably with a multinational corporation as an engineer, which led me to resign from my job and start working in the rural sector. Now, this was a process. It started with questioning, but then, I gradually realized that there's much more to it. Gradually, we led to a process, which ultimately led to understanding and putting into practice the principles of self-help. These were basically evolution of methods of collective awareness. So these self-awareness and collective awareness practices can essentially be practiced anywhere in the world, in any context. And that is why they are gaining a lot of popularity in almost all cultural and socio-economic contexts, whether it is South Asia, whether it is Africa, whether it is Europe or America. And that is why I'm very pleased that I'm able to share these with you so that you can maybe start thinking about how to connect more deeply and put it into action, either in your community or to support others who are working in their communities. Now, as we start with collective awareness, the process is universal. One can think of culture specific interventions, but some innovation is needed. For example, collective awareness in India, we started with the idea of prayers, but in other countries, collective singing of prayers may not be a cultural, kind of happiness. There are different ways in which people sit and do work together in different cultural contexts. In African tribes, for example, people like to sit together and beat the drums. I've seen that happen. That's why I'm saying that we have to be innovative in trying to identify what is the best cultural context in which we sit together and build collective awareness. One of the key universal principles is what I learned from my own mentor, Swami Nardanand. And this was very interesting because he said that basically when we are talking about religion, whatever religion, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, whatever, the key idea is to build self-discipline and compassion. And he says that is the true meaning of religion. Self-discipline and compassion. Now I heard from him almost 40 years back. But when we started practicing this at the grassroots level, we were able to put, these words into practice. And that led to beautiful results. Compassion. Now, building compassion and self-discipline is a mechanism that, what we practice in India, it can be easily practiced in another cultural context. But let me explain to you how we practiced it in India. So it was all about identifying a prayer in India that could be sung by people of all backgrounds, Hindus, Muslims, or whatever background. So we identified a prayer, and when we shared this prayer with people, people liked the words of it, and we used to, gradually train them to sing together. And that was the beauty, because the singing of the prayers led to people becoming, calm. When people come to a meeting, sometimes they bring the problems they have at home or in the on their profession to the meeting, and they start fighting. But when we start a meeting with a prayer, people are calmed down, and there is some positive energy, and that leads to a very good output. And that is the beginning of collective awareness. We have to start somewhere in small ways. How do we build an awareness which is collective? So the collective prayers was a beautiful, let us say, innovation that helped us to move forward. We tried to identify these methods in other cultural contexts also, and we found that there are ways in which this can be done together. One of the methods was meditation, collective meditation, all simply sitting together and being very quiet, gradually leading to a common understanding, some kind of an internal synergy that also helps a lot in moving forward and build collective awareness. So, but at the village level, we found that collective prayers was the best thing possible. So this is a scene of people from various villages coming together, sitting, and then simply sitting down and singing their prayers. As I mentioned before, compassion and self-discipline. Now, how do we bring in self-discipline? So in a self-help group, for example, there are some rules and procedures laid out. And those rules and procedures are very basic to functioning of self-help groups. One of the rules is that people must be from a homogeneous social and economic background. They have to give a monthly contribution to the entire group. And believe me, this is not something particular to India. I was recently, a few years back, invited to a meeting in Norway, one of the richest countries in the world, where one of my friends asked me to coordinate a meeting in one of their counties, where they were unable to come to a common agreement because people were from different backgrounds that they couldn't speak to each other. So we use the same principles of self-help. First of all, we said, let us first look at people who are from a homogeneous background. Let us first create their groups, and then we integrate their groups, put them all together, and then let's have the meeting with them. So the process is actually same everywhere. And this has to be, since there's no point in reinventing the wheel. So might as well, go through the experience that we've been through of how to create this mechanism of self-help. It works beautifully. It's almost like a science, a social science. And so, but whole idea is again to build some kind of a self-discipline in the group. So there are many other formats for self-discipline. So for example, there are, mechanisms through which people pay penalty if there is something wrong, but everyone has to agree. So these are some very basic fundamentals of self-help groups that can be applied in any context. We have done that through training programs in countries in Africa, for example, in Ethiopia, in Kenya, in parts of South Asia, in Nepal, in Sri Lanka, and also, in some of the countries in Europe. The principles are all same. And I want to stress here to the participants who are listening to this talk that this is not about an Indian program. We are now using these principles in all contexts. It's a universal method. And please do take a glance at the methods and try to adopt them wherever you are working and see the huge impact it has. So this is about certain principles of self-help. How do we build compassion and self-discipline? The other process of collective awareness is collective reflection. Now, this is another very interesting part because after prayers, it is not just about immediate, talking about business. It's about enabling people to reflect on their problems. So we go around, everyone in a very peaceful, calm way tries to present a problem. The other person is open to challenge it, have a discussion, and then, a facilitator has to be very strong. Training in good facilitation is also important for that. There are methods through which good facilitator can organize collective reflection sessions. It's again, since we have been doing it for 2 decades, we can easily share some of these methods and values needed for the purpose. Once it leads to a group synergy, some group awareness, that is when magic comes through. People sit together and decide, yes, we have to now create a group. And creation of a group is not a temporary thing. It is something that goes on for years. It is something that usually builds, people's understanding of each other, coming together each other, and goes on for several years, through which they are able to move out of their current, it could be poverty situation, it could be their social situation, it could be their health problems, it could be anything. So self-help is a mechanism through which people are able to rise above their problems. In countries in global south, these are basically linked to poverty or social injustice. But in other places, for example, in Norway, it was the youth connecting together to start small businesses. In homeless context, in the US or in other places, people can create self-help groups for identifying and connecting to resolution of homelessness problems. Principles will be same. We'll have to innovate to see how do we facilitate a process of collective awareness and collective reflection. So as I mentioned, it was about a few years back, we were invited to a very deep rural Kenyan community in a place called Wamunyu. And this is in Wamunyu, where these are all women from villages. So we were trying to facilitate. On the left, you see my wife, Dr. Amla. I'm sitting behind on that table. We use the same very principles in trying to build collective awareness among the women leaders. And then we went to their villages where they facilitated the same process. And now a self-help kind of a process and a movement has started in parts of Kenya. Again, we need to understand that when we enable a process to start, we must also have some kind of minimum funds for the support of the facilitators. But these facilitators are trained to connect to these facilitators, could be the women leaders also. These could be outside agents, outsiders in the local NGO, but they have to be trained in methods of building these self-awareness and collective awareness methods. So we started this process in Kenya, also in Ethiopia. In fact, many of our trained facilitators are now looking for funds so that they are able to continue the process through which women can be organized and empowered to move out of their current situation. This is an example of Ethiopia, where women leaders came from different parts of Tigray. Tigray it's in a civil war situation now. It's a totally resourceless area. But how, you see, the comments of one woman, she says, her name is Fito, she says, people in our area thought that they will live poor forever. Now we know that this is not true. I can see the difference in my knowledge after coming here. The real concept of self-help groups is looking inward. Beautiful statement. She understood the concept very well. This is just to give you a small impact statement. Self-help groups lead to major all-round transformation, and they help in achieving the sustainable development goals. That is not just economic and social empowerment, it is building their collective decision making capacity, building leadership and spirit of working towards justice, building financial discipline. So important. It's all part of the process of training facilitators who in turn are able to help people manage their finances and a whole set of new relationships that emerge as a result. One of the many side, let's say, side benefits is a huge reduction in domestic violence. A large part of our society, everywhere in global south, is faced with issues of violence, is faced with issues of health, very serious issues of health. But when women sit together, talk about these issues, and it is properly facilitated, answers start rolling out. Answers start rolling out, first of all, at the level of people themselves. And gradually, people are able to connect to where exactly the problem is. And together, they can then go to an office or a medical hospital there together as a unit. And that's what makes a huge difference. When people together are able to put up their issues, their problems to some authority, it makes a huge difference. Let me tell you, friends, I have been working in this sector for 30 years. When problems emerge, it is very important to be able to, for the people, to be able to sort them out properly, identify a key issue there, and then talk to the authority. And that makes all the difference. It creates the magic. So the impact of self-help groups is not just about people coming together and doing some kind of a vague self-help. It's about resolution of almost all their problems. Social, economic, health, education, you name it. It all can be resolved through this process. And so, when I sit together talking to you, I'm thinking of Aboriginals in Australia. I'm thinking of Ukraine. I'm thinking of anything. All the problems can be resolved at the community level through a process of building collective awareness. We have to facilitate the process. Somebody has to support the facilitators. Somebody has to train the facilitators. Then we need to do some hand holding with them. And the community itself moves forward. We simply have to facilitate the process from outside. Now, when we need to scale up, see, one thing is to work through a few facilitators. The other thing is to take it up to a national level or to a whole region level. So we have to have professional facilitators. Professionals means they are well trained, they have some experience, or that experience can be gained gradually. So we have been now training professionals in India for almost 20 years. These professionals came from government, they came from banks because the banks had to lend money to the people. These professionals came from academic institutions because they wanted to learn how to create this change, how to create positive change. The creation of positive change is a phenomena that most people don't understand because and the whole idea of self-help seems to really bother them. That how can a poor person do self-help? So a lot of academicians have been coming to train and a large number of students, of course. So again, we have to do collective reflection with them because they come with their own ideas and then we follow the same process. First of all, sitting together and, in the case of, professionals, it is more like meditation, a bit of yoga, and then talking about some issues that I'll now speak of. So collective reflection combined with methods of building self-awareness through self-reflection. So we'll talk a little bit about what are these methods of self-reflection. So when we talk about self-reflection, it's good to start with, the values that have emerged from the different civilizations of our Mother Earth. We've had the Roman civilization, we had the Greek civilization, we had this Chinese and Indian. All of them have contributed significantly to the thought process. Unfortunately, many of us, have not connected to some of the fundamentals of using those thoughts, using those practical wisdom in our daily lives. I often refer to Socrates and his beautiful statement, which is called "An unexamined life is not worth living." Now, one has to understand that life is not a routine stuff. Just simply go to work and come back home and then, have children and, go to the beach, enjoy there, or go to the pub. That's a very dry life. One has to start thinking, what am I living for? What is the whole purpose? And when one starts doing it, it leads to, some answers that we ourselves were, we never thought about them. So, and that's what Socrates said, that an unexamined life, we have not examined our own lives. We are just simply, moving like goats or herds. Whatever we see ahead of us, we see that as reality and just move in that direction. Social work, the traditional way of doing social work, we just move ahead with that. Academics, you name any field, people simply start doing things according to whatever they have learned it from their peers or the social structure around it. One has to start examining that, go deep into it, and look for alternatives. And that's when the magic occurs. So Socrates was among many who pointed this out. There were so many. I'll just put across one or two here more from other civilizations. We had this great man from India called Swami Vivekananda, and he said the same thing in different words. He said that he talked about a vegetating ignorant life. The same thing, unexamined life, is he's just calling it vegetating ignorant life. He said rather than having such routine ignorant life, death is better. Death is better than a vegetating ignorant life. What am I doing? Why am I doing? I must be questioning myself all the time and trying to move up in my understanding of reality, in my own level of consciousness. And that's what gives joy. That's what gives meaning. This kind of self-reflection is very fundamental to joyful, meaningful living. And many of us forget about it totally. In whatever context we are, rich or poor, north or south, east or west, doesn't really matter. We have to reflect on what exactly are we trying to achieve. These were the statements given to by my mentor. His name was Nathanand. He was a self-realized person. I was able to get direct mentorship from him when he lived almost 40 years back. And he always kept asking me, what purpose are you living for? What is your purpose? He said, your livelihood is okay for a living, but then why are you living? Why are you alive? You must understand, why are we living? There is a purpose. We must understand that there is a purpose. We must try to go deep. Now, here is where the yoga connection comes in. We are unable to go deep into our life and our purpose unless we have a calm mind. The mind has to be calm. And therefore, yoga. We'll come to that again. For a deeper exploration, we need to practice the principles of yoga. Now, yoga was, famously described by its father. The father of yoga is called Maharshi Patanjali, the saint Patanjali. So he described yoga as, chitta vritti nirodha. This is a Sanskrit term which translates to yoga is the restraint of the fluctuations of the mind. So it is all about moving towards a calm mind. This aspect is almost forgotten by most of us. We are rushing towards achieving some kind of goals, and at the same time, we are worried, we are frustrated. No, that's all right, but we must have a method through which we are able to sit quietly at any time of a day, or at night, or in the evening, or even while we're at work, and be absolutely quiet. This idea of a quiet mind is now being understood by scientists all over the world. They call it the alpha state. You must have heard of this, the De Silva method. Everyone is talking about calming the mind now. Again, when I say everyone, only a few enlightened people. A large number are still just going round and round, doing whatever they are doing without trying to go deeper into understanding the reality. And the reality, the surface reality is never, usually never the truth. To understand the truth, we have to go deep. And for that, it is about calming the mind. And calming the mind is a process. It doesn't just happen automatically. Some people in the West are trying to use this as an automatic method, the theory U and so on, which is being taught in Harvard and many other places. Is that you just sit down quiet and you are able to, get to the bottom of your mind and be absolutely quiet. It doesn't happen automatically. It's a process. And this process has been quite scientifically evolved in the Indian subcontinent. So might as well pick up from those basics. And what are those basics? We all have, a subconscious. That subconscious needs to be cleansed. What is it? It's all about biases, it's about prejudices, it's all about preconceived notions, it's about self-righteousness. I am right all the time. It's about arrogance. It's all about complexes that arise because of our social status, because of our education, you know. So we have this complex that I am right. This is frightening because this is what leads to some kind of a feeling of superiority, and the mind never becomes calm as a result. What is most important is to find ways in which we can calm our mind. And for that, it is very essential to cleanse ourselves, to remove all these biases and these notions that we have built into our whole system of thinking and working. So we have these habitual patterns of thinking. And, and if you go lower down, we are all the time envious, we are greedy, we are jealous, we have all kinds of unfulfilled desires, we have urge to dominate, we have the urge to win at all costs. Just examine your thoughts. We cannot move towards a calm mind with all these funny things creeping in our heads all the time. And therefore, to be able to calm the mind, we have to follow certain steps in yoga. These are called yoga, and that's why I'm speaking about this on the International Yoga is Day on the 21st. But I thought it's a good idea to introduce some of these subjects and enable at least some of us to start working towards this, to start at least moving some steps in that direction. So we have tried to phrase this in terms of conscious living, and conscious self-control is one of these steps. So what are the different steps in conscious living? Some of them we have covered, for example, here, the self-reflection. It's a very deep, very interesting part of life which we all must follow. And there has to be a process. It has to be very sincere. And this is just baby steps. Believe me, these are just baby steps. Because once we start doing it, there will be a lot of confusion. Where we are going, what are we trying to achieve? And therefore, to resolve that confusion, we have to go a little more deeper. So when we are doing this course, we'll try to go deeper into how do we manage to do self-reflection properly? How do we manage to do collective reflection properly? How do we manage to do conscious self-control properly? Similarly, it is about conscious relationships, whether it is within the family, whether it is at work, whether it is in society. There are ways through which we can have definite improvement in relationship, and it's all about practice. There is no theory here. We have been practicing these methods, we have been sharing these methods with professionals, with students, and with amazing outcomes. I'm very humbly, I would like to say that please do understand that yes, we might be thinking that we are doing a lot of good, but something that has been already proven, the idea of self-help, the whole idea of being able to calm the mind, the whole idea of moving in steps towards improved consciousness that helps us more than anything else. So similarly about conscious speech, similarly about conscious sharing. A lot of us give some of our resources, but we simply give it out, maybe to a church, maybe to some organization. Wrong giving is also leading to a lot of nonsense. I've always talking about being very consciously sharing your property or wealth or resources. We must enable and empower people through our sharing process, not simply just give it out and who knows what is happening to it. Let us be more conscious of the way we share our resources, and it can become a beautiful joy in doing it. Let's and we are able to share these methods when we do this course. What are the options available to do this conscious sharing? Even about there's a lot of problem when many of us are in their 40s, 50s, or 60s. We have accumulated some wealth, but we don't know how to use it properly, and it usually gets used up in the wrong direction. So if you start using these wealth properly at the right time, that's what gives us joy and that's what gives us immense pleasure and also leads to better self control and better self awareness. The last part is also about conscious buying. A lot of we are all into consumerism, buying things left and right. Uh, is there a way? I have found that there's a very good way when we share these with young people and we start asking them questions and we help them to start asking questions themselves. That's when they start realizing that all that has been happening over time with their purchasing behavior was perhaps wrong. It has to be their own judgment. We only facilitate a process of sharing. So these steps in conscious living, I have found so far, are quite fundamental to transformation of people in any context, anywhere in the world, and from there on to enabling them to move on to share their 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 whole existence, their being, their resources with others through enabling and empowering. This entire thing, therefore, is a way in which one can think about transforming all the kinds of problems that we have in the world today. It's whether it is social injustice, whether it is terrorism, whether it is crime, whether it is poverty, whether it is injustice. These are mechanisms through which we can start the process ourselves and we can help others to start in their own community. I'm saying very humbly, I deeply implore you to enable and understand the subject and start participating in it and enable yourselves and the world to move forward in the right direction. Let me give you some sample impact. Sample, these are one among thousands. Let me say thousand. I'm saying very humbly that these are words one among thousands. So these are some government officers who get a new understanding of change. Now, this is his reflection which he gave in writing. He says, I had never thought about myself. It is true that my earlier notions were based on an arrogance. Now, he's describing himself as arrogant, that whatever I am doing is right. Not anymore. I realize that I know so little. A wonderful word coming from a government officer. And he said that he can really learn from an honest, caring attitude towards one another. Another government officer says that my negative thinking has completely changed. This negative thinking is so common. People start thinking about negatively about others immediately. As soon as they meet the other person, they will have a negative thought about the other person. So this negative thought process has to, people have to first understand themselves that this is where the change is needed. Now he says that it will be possible to bring social change only after abandoning, the selfishness and the consumptive nature. I want it. I agreed, all the time. We are all affected by it, but it's just somebody who has been, honestly admitting it. This is more again at the international level. There is a friend from Kenya and another Olav, a student who came to learn from us here in Manavodaya in Lucknow. James from Kenya says that after the program, that it dawned to me and many other participants that life is more than just earning an income and raising a family. So it is about those deep reflections which were quite fundamental in reinforcing the power of self-consciousness and inner peace. Now, this is so important for everyone. We all, when we are talking about social change, it's about building a new sense of consciousness and peace. And it has to be based on building self-awareness, something that has not trickled down to a large number of people working anywhere in the world. It is a social change seems to be a mechanical process of transferring some funds from one place to the other. And it becomes so routine and dry, where it can become a sense of joy to many people. I know many people do practice it properly, but to be able to train people to build that self-awareness and the collective awareness leads to so much more. This student from Norway, for example, Olaf, he came a few years back, and then he says, to be able to make the right decisions and think clear, you must have knowledge about what happens in your mind. So he exactly understood in the context of calming the mind and that how you can control it. To be able to control even a tiny part of your mind, you have to work on yourself. You see, the important part is we have to work on oneself. It doesn't come automatically. Try to understand where thoughts come from. Why do they make you feel the way you feel? And in an uncalm and unclear mind, you make wrong decisions. There's such a fundamental understanding that if the mind is not calm, we can never take the right decisions. Calming the mind is a very fundamental aspect of life, and this is what is called yoga. Let us try to build yogic understanding and practices in our daily lives. So, to summarize, we are talking about building of collective awareness in communities, which leads to self-help, empowerment, poverty elevation. It's a well-tested method. We have tested it among thousands. It has led to change in the living conditions of millions. So it's a well-tested method. What is it? How do we build self-help through collective awareness? And it can be applied anywhere. Homeless, oppressed, excluded groups, anywhere. Unfortunately, it is still not spreading. People everywhere are doing things perhaps in the same way as the government is trying to tell them, or something new. I try to introduce the subject in during my one of my visits in Norway. I try to talk to even the members of parliament there, but some inertia, I don't know what that inertia is, doesn't enable leads people from not trying to look at reality and not trying to look at perspectives that can be learned so easily. So again, I'm imploring, please do look at this theme closely, and it is a well established method. It leads to resolution of so many problems in the world, not only for us but also to enable others to move in that direction. It's a paradigm shift. Again, we have to start with our own life, practice the steps in conscious living. It's all practical wisdom. It's based on values that cut across civilizations. Believe me, I've since then I've been reading the Chinese civilizational thought leaders, Lao Tzu, for example, even from the Roman Catholic world. Persons like Francis Assisi, persons in the Greek civilization. There are so many, and the Indian civilization is absolutely rich. There are hundreds. So I've been reading a lot about, particularly about Sri Aurobindo method, and they are so deep, so powerful, meaningful to almost all of us. Unfortunately, in our some kind of a drive to just go ahead, we are unable to look at gems lying around in our own in our own human heritage. We are unfortunately not looking at those gems, and that is why we are unable to be a little more effective, in fact far more effective in what we are doing. So such kind of awareness and action can be applied to anyone, not just social workers. It can apply to politicians, the youth, in fact, citizens anywhere, concerned citizens across the world. We need to put these methods forward. Please find ways in which we can train the trainers. We can have teachers who understand these methods, who can teach them to others. Can we enable people in other countries in global south, to many of the donors, to understand that please link your money to some new methods that facilitate empowerment, that facilitate new methods of conscious living, and that can create beautiful outcomes. I'll stop here. Let's have a discussion on the whole theme, and then it'll be good to listen to your views and to find ways in which the ideas can be spread forward more deeply, and in fact more widely.
Thank you so much, Varun, for this inspiring speech. This video will be available on Citizen Network TV on YouTube. So please subscribe and join Manavodaya and the movement for conscious living.